2 years ago, I made a video called I Invented a Horrible New Gambit and Beat Stockfish with it, and in that video, I took this ridiculous position and beat the world's strongest engine, only this was the catch: this position had never been played before. There were 0 games in the Lee Chess database. Well, now, 2 years later, we are going to go back and we are going to see, has anybody played this absolutely ridiculous gambit where a lot of the times you were sacking 2, maybe even more pieces in order to get a gigantic center and a huge attack on white? And what are the results? Is anybody winning with it? That is exactly what we're going to be discussing, because honestly, the hardest part about coming up with a brand new gambit is the fact that there's no theory to discuss. And if you want to make a video on it and say, here's all of the things that are going to happen if you play this ridiculous gambit, you can't do it because theory doesn't exist. Theory doesn't exist until a bunch of people play the games and you got like a whole bunch of themes that emerge and a bunch of patterns arise. So that's exactly what we are going to be jumping into. And here is the thing that surprised me. So this video has received in the last 2 years 150,000 views. Thank you guys for watching the video. And since then, 985 total games have been played. And here's kind of the remarkable thing: 56% of the time it's actually black that wins the game, and only 41% does white win. And that is kind of crazy because this position is +5 for white, according to Stockfish. It's an absolutely horrible, ridiculous gambit, and today we're actually going to be walking you through it. If you want something really wacky that you can play against the Evans Gambit, this is 100% what you want to check out. It's the Weasel Gambit, so that's what we're going to be calling it. I called that in the video, so let's just stick with it, and let's examine it. Now we have some games. Look at this. I got this gigantic database I can go through, and we are going to be seeing exactly what happens. That is the goal for today. So let's back up and actually see, how do we get there? How do we play the Weasel Gambits? Well, this is something you can play against e4. You play e5, and if they play knight f3, you play knight to c6. So far, nothing weird. They play the Italian game with bishop to c4. You play bishop to c5, this is the Gioco piano, and if they play b4, trying to surprise you with the Evans Gambit, you take the first pawn, but after c3, white's idea is you're going to move your bishop somewhere, and then they are going to be playing pawn to d4. You surprise them with the absolutely ridiculous-looking move, pawn to f5. And the idea here is that if white takes your bishop, we are going to be taking this e-pawn, and in this way we are going to be getting this huge center. We're following it up with a very quick d5, and we have at least 2 pawns for the piece, so that in itself seems very good. And we do have some very strong potential for a very quick attack because we have the f-file that we can potentially use. We have a queen that might be able to sneak in if the knight moves away, and this is where we reach a critical position. This is basically the starting point where 3 moves have appeared. Now, if you've never seen this position, I think the first and most natural move is knight to g1. Your knight is attacked, so of course you are going to run away. And this actually does occur in the database 58% of the time. This is what you're expected to see most games that you play. And of course, why would you not? But this is actually not a particularly good move for white, but it's so natural, a lot of people are going to fall for it. Now, the move that actually surprised me the most, this is the most popular, but the move that really surprised me, and I don't think I ever could have anticipated, was that a lot of players are playing knight takes e5. This is a counter gambit. White is sacrificing the pawn back in order to be able to bring the queen out for a check, and it does get a little bit interesting, but it's probably also not the antidote that white is looking for. The reason that Stockfish says that this is +5 is because of this move, b5, a counter attack, which is not very intuitive, and only 10% of your opponents will find it statistically. So let's dive into it. We got 3 moves to cover, and they're all very fun. So starting with, what happens if they play knight to g1? And again, this is what you expect to see most times that you play the Weasel Gambits. So here we play pawn to d5. We are able to get a huge center. Also, I'm a little bit sick, so apologies. If I need to take a couple cough breaks, I can do some editing if I absolutely have to. But we play pawn to d5, and we attack the bishop. And here, the bishop needs to move away. And most of the time, opponents choose to go to b5, pinning our knight, which is a very sensible square. Now, this prevents us from taking this pawn on b4, but perhaps more importantly, opens up white's idea of playing queen to h5. Now, if white decides to do this a move too early, which has happened, Here you have g6, and white might think they have this clever move attacking your king and attacking your rook, but of course, our knight is not pinned, and this has actually happened in at least one game on Lichess that finished this way. So after this, though, you do want to be a little bit cautious as black, because now this queen is trying to come into h5 and trying to cause a lot of problems. So as black, what are you going to do? We need to continue. We're down a little bit of material, but we have this huge center. We need to continue to force the issue. And you have a very strong move in queen to g5, which threatens to take this pawn on g2. And if black can take the pawn on g2, black is an absolutely crushing position. It's not easy to defend this rook. There's no resources with queen to f3 because we have this pawn here preventing it. White absolutely needs to do something to defend this pawn, and the ways that you would defend it are with the moves g3, or king to f1. Now, g3 is most popular, king to f1 is the computer choice, so let's kind of walk through them and show why these moves have some potential downsides for white. Now, g3 is a very weakening move that white does not want to play. It completely weakens all of these light squares around the king. You can imagine at some point, particularly if maybe this knight came out, maybe this bishop would be sneaking around and trying to come into these light squares, or maybe even more impressive would be if we could get this knight unpinned so that this knight could hop into these squares. Something like that, if this knight ever landed on f3, that could be potentially devastating for white, depending on the situation. Also, we have this f file, with the black pieces. So if we can ever get castled quickly, we might be able to get some massive attack. And that's why there is a very strong move that's even stronger than bishop to g4, and it's knight to e7. Supporting this knight, so in the event that white actually does want to capture, we can recapture, and we have another knight that might be able to come to the d4 square, peeking in at a lot of light squares around the king. But we're also staying off of the f-file so that we can castle quickly, we can put our queen somewhere on the f-file, and we can get a massive attack. Now, white here is always, according to the 3 games that have reached this position, going to play d4, and this is where you need to be a little bit careful. Watch out. When you played queen to g5, you did walk into this alignment with the bishop, but fortunately, you can just stay on the f-file, castle, and you're going to have a massive position. Like, for example, if they take, don't worry about taking back right away. You're castling, you're putting pressure here. Even if white defends that pawn, this knight is taking here. This knight is going to hop in at some moments, and this is absolutely devastating for black. Like, g3 is actually such a weakening move that you should be able to get a massive attack no matter what happens. Well, okay, so after our opponent's retreat, is there anything else that our opponents could have done differently? Well, according to the computer, after queen to g5, the best move for white is to try to play king to f1. And this is kind of an awkward move, but you really don't want to make any weaknesses with the white pieces. And here I discovered a very interesting game played between two 2100s on Lichess. It went knight to f6. This is very sensible. There's no reason to go to e7 in this exact position because there's not the same weaknesses. You're not necessarily needing to support this knight. If white ever takes, you're always going to take back and get the Weasel pawn structure. I think one of the games I played against Stockfish featured this pawn structure, and we called it the Weasel. But you know, this is just a very sensible square. We're here, so if knight c3, we have our center completely defended. The knight has some good potential future homes, especially if we're castling. The knight might be able to do some very serious work. Well, there's a game that also featured d4. This is the typical move for white. Attacking the queen, very important. It's the one thing that I guess you must see. And I like what was played in this game. A human opponent played queen to f5. This is very sensible, staying on the f-file so that when you castle, you already have this battery against f2. And in that game, we saw pawn takes, queen takes back, so the queen was forced off of the d-file, but it's not such a huge issue, and in fact, we are already attacking the rook. White played queen to c2, which is actually the top Stockfish move. It's getting very difficult to be able to save your rook. And in the game, obviously, the human took the rook. White went here, black went here, and everything was fine. Black eventually won this game. However, there is a much stronger move than taking this rook. And when I saw this, I was like, holy cow, this crazy computer idea. Stockfish says instead, just castle. Why even bother taking the rook? And after the bishop goes to b2, why don't you just play? And it looks like maybe we're just setting up to maybe take here. So white goes here, and you're like, you're looking, white, my queen? Why did I just give away my queen? Well, it's for knight to e3. This was the sneaky move. Attacking the king, taking back the queen, and now you're threatening this rook in the corner. And for the moment, we're threatening 2 pieces. Obviously, white can grab our knight in order to not lose this bishop, and after this recapture, black is going to be winning material. We also have this bishop that's coming out. Our rooks are going to enter into the game really quickly, and this is actually just incredibly winning for black. So I thought that was a very cool idea, but the big takeaway is that if they do move their knight all the way back, which we can run this back one last time, if they move their knight back to g1, this is exactly what you want. You play d5, you follow it up with a quick queen to g5, you make sure you lose your queen, you defend all your stuff, you bring your knight out, you castle very quickly, and you should be able to get a very good position as black. Now, here's the thing that surprised me the most about the Weasel Gambit, and this is the kind of thing where when there's no games, there is a move that I very likely would have overlooked, and it's this counter sacrifice, and it occurs in about 12% of all of the games, and white goes, knight takes e5. Pause for coughing because I'm very sick. All right, sorry, I'm very sick, so my throat is kind of killing me today, but I got to get this video out because I'm very excited about this gambit. Now, knight takes e5. It's an interesting idea to give back a piece, but is it even that good for white? Well, obviously, as black, we are going to take the knight back, and white's idea is to play queen to h5, delivering this check, attacking the knight. This is not the end of the story, however, because we can simply move our knight back to g6. And here comes an interesting situation. Either white can just get on with life. You could castle, for example. You could develop your bishop, for example. Or white tries to win a pawn with this peculiar move. Bishop takes g8, forcing the rook to move over so white can take this h-pawn. And I guess if you're going to play this counter gambit as white, you must be thinking of the greedy line. You're going to go in and try to win a pawn, because if you just castle, for example, we are going to be able to play knight to f3. We attack the queen. Wherever the queen decides to go, we play pawn to d5. This is exactly what we want as black. This is nothing that we fear. And here we're actually a pawn up, which doesn't make any sense because we have the entire center. We have the fantastic position. We're still castling very quickly. You got to waste more time with your bishop. It doesn't matter where you go. And we're going to have a fun time looking for an attack. We got this bishop and this knight that can go to this square. This is going to be excellent for black. So if you do get into this position, it's much more likely that white is going to try to play the greedy line. They want to go here and take your knight with the idea that when you take back, they are able to take on h7. And this I thought was actually like a fascinating idea until I asked my computer, and it's like, dumb. Black is just like gonna win. It's not even a problem. So not even an interesting idea by the opponents. Try to be more clever next time. King to f7 is the move that protects both of your pieces. Also, you got this queen that's coming in, and already we're threatening to trap the white queen. We got rook h8 on tap. We are going to be coming in and trying to blast away. So most opponents are playing queen to h5, getting the queen out so that if we go here, the queen can run away to safety. But again, you just play d5, and it doesn't really matter. Knight to c3, attacking this. Notice how there's two pieces attacking it. But after this, you actually have a very comfortable position. And the problem is, white can never really castle. If white ever decides to castle, they are just going to get checkmated. You play rook to h8, and after they go back, you're bringing this queen in, and it's just over. If they try to defend like this, you're going to be sacking in. So there's really not much that white can do, but they can get to this position, which is at least without castling. Castling is just a huge mistake. They can play for this, but it should be good for black. But it's kind of an interesting thing to keep in mind. Just you can kick this queen away, continue developing your pieces, and you should actually have a very good position. But why have you never seen this? Why do the computers say that this is ridiculous? Why has nobody ever tried this gambit before? Well, there is a line that Stockfish will say is about +5 at first, and it's the line that goes with taking, and after you take back, not moving the knight right away, but rather the most critical way for white to continue is to play b5 and counterattack our knight, which does lead to a very fantastic position. And of course, a lot of people might be tempted to take. Maybe you'd play d5 attacking a second piece. But in my game against Stockfish, and honestly, I thought I had it loaded in here, but it turns out maybe I don't, so I'm going to have to kind of remember this game from memory. But we're also kind of seeing what humans have done in this position. I played queen to f6. I always want this knight to go back. I am not interested in necessarily winning a piece right away. And if you take back here, I'm not taking the knight right away. I am taking on c6. This is the fantastic idea. You get this pawn structure. We're going to be playing d5, and we're going to get the Weasel pawn structure, sacrificing two entire pieces in order to try to get this massive conglomerate in the center. I've never seen so many center pawns in my life. And what you're saying is, if you want to protect material, which is what most people do, it's what Stockfish did in its game against me 2 years ago, you are going to be going back. And we got to this fascinating position after d5, attacking the bishop. It moved its bishop back, and there's still quite a lot of human games from this position. But if you take kind of a close inspection of it, I am obviously going to be very quick on the F file. If I remember right, and I'm not promising that I do, you can check the entire video if you want to see what actually happened. I played knight to e7, and again, it's all about this F file. It's about getting this immediate battery going on f2. The opponent went knight to e2, and if I remember right, I didn't castle right away. The most human way to play is here, and everybody castles, allowing this as a potential idea with some sacrifices, including bishop to f3 as a potential idea. And that's exactly what happened in my game. I started with this one. And after Stockfish went h3, I can still remember it because it's one of the most beautiful moments of my life. I castled, immediately threatening this mate, basically forcing white to castle. And somewhere in here, maybe on this move, or maybe on this move, Stockfish said something like +10. Like, absolutely black is just getting toasted here. But I ask you this. Would you really want to play this as white? Do you want to try to figure out how to defend this ridiculous thing? And in the game, the computer took. And I did not even take back. I either went knight here or I booked my queen, and I'm honestly confused at this moment. But I do remember at some point, white played like as greedy as possible. It's a computer that's just taking everything. I brought the rook in, I brought the queen in, and the knight comes in for some checkmating attacks. Now, I am going to honestly forget how that game went. But this is the kind of attack that you're playing for. You want to take this, you want this knight coming to h4, you want to deliver a checkmate on g2. And I'll be honest, this is probably losing, maybe, but maybe it's not. Maybe you need to do some deeper analysis. I don't think depth 20 Stockfish is enough to actually say anything about this position, because there's this long-term attacking horizon that the computer actually might not be able to understand. And we're bringing rooks in if we need to. Knights are hopping in somewhere. It's a lot of fun. And you let me know, would you play the Weasel Gambit even today? And are you going to be one of the first 1,000 to play it? I hope you are. And if so, good luck to you, I guess. Subscribe.